Right, hello everyone. This is Claire, and welcome to episode 1 of Cold and Fluffy, where I will sit here and give you my inoffensive, boring, and humorless takes on the state of FHDL, the Fluffer League. I plan each week to go through the games that were played in the previous week and give my thoughts, and then also look at the games that are coming up in the following week and make some predictions, which I'll be doing on this page right here, and we'll be tracking those. Maybe compare myself to Barrel and Princess a bit, since they're doing a similar thing on their podcast pod racing doodad. But this week, obviously, there haven't been any games played yet, so we'll be making predictions for week 1. But instead of going over the games, I'm going to go over the draft. I'll briefly go over the pool as a whole, and my thoughts there, and then we'll go through each team individually. I'll give my general thoughts on the team, and I'll give them a ranking. So it's going to sort of be like a power ranking. I won't actually order them like 1 through 12 at the end of it. I'll just give them a letter grade. And I don't know, maybe I'll put the list in order in the description or something. But for now, let's take a look at the list as a whole, the list of players as a whole. This auction draft I honestly didn't think went too bad. When you have this many captains that haven't done auction before with a crazy, highly varied pool in terms of MMR width. I mean, it goes all the way from 100 to 460, which is pretty insane. I honestly think it went pretty well. A lot of things could have gone wrong here. The teams are definitely further apart in MMR than probably desired. I think there are a couple captains that maybe weren't super happy with their drafts, and maybe a couple captains that were too happy with their drafts. But overall, I don't think anyone has a disastrous team. They all look pretty even. I don't think any single player, or at least, yeah, I don't think any single player went for too, like, an insane amount. Some, I think, maybe went for too much or too little, but there isn't anything that looks disastrous, in my opinion. As for the things I said in my 90-minute video, I I'll not force you guys to go back and watch it. I'll just say what I said here. I said that I thought mids were going to go for quite a lot. The mid pool was quite small, and that I assumed would mean that the mids would get contested quite highly and bid up quite high, but that didn't really happen. Alith was the most expensive mid at 550, but above him in cost was Scroomlight at 600, Phantom at 700, and JD at 650, all of which are pause 1 players. So all those really high numbers end up being pause 1s. You also had Lava slightly above him at 555, who is a 1-3 flex. So I think overall, captains ended up putting a lot of emphasis on the pause 1 role, which makes a lot of sense. I did also mention in that video that I think pause 1 is super important. I just didn't expect it to get focused as much as it did. Additionally, we saw, for the most part, as expected, a lot of the higher mark players were brought up round 1, and as the list goes down, I guess Platinum was also brought up round 1. But for the most part, it was fairly linear that way. I also wanted to briefly look at the MMR per cost of players. This is literally just MMR divided by cost, so how much MMR you get per fluffer spent. And this is a little interesting. We'll ignore J up here because I think they're a bit of an outlier. The only reason theirs is so low is because they only had 100 MMR to begin with. But I will focus on a couple of these guys and then these guys down here. I think it makes sense that these big MMR core players are going to be valued for a lot more than just their MMR. The fact that they're potentially the best player in their role means that you're not just getting a very good player, you're getting, someone that no one can beat in theory. I don't think that's entirely true with Phantom per se, because there's a couple captains with Yumi and Harb that are potentially better than him, but for the most part, JD, Phantom, probably two of the best pause 1s in the pool. Screamlight's also pretty high up here as well. Weeb Slayer and Jackman kind of stand out as being lower than everyone else. Most of these players are over 350 in this like lower range. JD is the only one close to 350, but I think most people agree he plays above that. So these two are unique. I don't necessarily think they maybe should have gone for this much. They're maybe valued a bit too high, and we'll go over that when we go over their teams. But I just thought, for the most part, this seems pretty sensible. Um, but on the other end, we get really extreme. We get Blackout out here with 45 fluffer or 45 MMR per fluffer. Maddie also very high, but Blackout's easily the standout here. Um, Maddie is, I think, somewhat similar to Jay, where they just don't have a lot of cost. So Jay didn't have a lot of MMR, so this is very low. Maddie just didn't go for very much. He's almost more comparable to these zero cost players than anything else, but Blackout's very unique in that they went for only 55 despite being a 2.5k player, which I think is probably a mistake. At least in PST Sunday, Blackout's being considered a stable pos 5 for his MMR for like years now. So it's crazy to me he went for so low, but there he is, so he wins the award for most MMR per fluffer, I guess. But yeah, anyway, that's that. Not too much else to say. Which is good because we don't want another 90-minute video if we can avoid it. So let's just jump into the teams here. Um, we'll start off. I guess I'll quickly explain just what this page is. We have, of course, the teams laid out here, their cost. Captains obviously don't have a cost, then the cost of the players. We have their MMR. We have their MMR per fluffer. And then we have the team average, the total cost of the team. This is only the players. This isn't necessarily the money the captain started out with, because some captains spent money on a coach. This is just the combined cost of the players. And then the MMR per fluffer of said players. So the 4 players MMR divided by the 4 players cost combined. Um, so yeah. Oh, I also made some minor adjustments here. You'll notice that a lot of the like 100 MMR players I adjusted up. I think using MMRs as low as 100 for the sake of looking at team averages is a little silly. In theory, there's a difference between like a 100 MMR player and a 1000 MMR player, but realistically, there's not like 10 times the difference. A 1000 MMR player isn't 10 times better than a 100 MMR player most of the time. And I think also looking at some of the Dota buffs of these 100 MMR players, like Katz, who was a captain who was already adjusted to 1000 MMR, I believe, and then like Jonslight, who I think's in the same stack. I mean, you just look at some of these guys, and they're like 100 games are ranked. 45% win rate overall, which is probably why they're heralds, but if you look more recently, or is it ranked? Like in the last 6 months, it's actually positive. I think most of these people are probably on the climb. They just calibrated too early or chose the wrong option when they started the game. Probably chose the I've not played a MOBA before option, which sets your base MMR very low. So yeah, I figured it was going to be way more accurate if I just adjusted them to 1000 rather than leave them at 100, because 100 is just bogging down the average to unrealistic amount, I think. So yeah. So anyway, Barrel's team. We saw Barrel go for a very balanced team here. He didn't spend too much on any one player. Most he ever spent was 320 on Mommy Jesus, which barely went under 10 MMR per fluffer. I guess I could mention, I believe the league average per MMR per fluffer was like 11.5. So if you took the entire league compared to the entire money pot, you'd expect on average people to go for 11.5. So Barrel for the most part got above average with 13. Um, so that's definitely a positive. The average MMR of the team ended up quite high at 2.9 because Barrel himself was one of the higher captains. I'd say on the downside is I don't really see how the roles on this team work out. If we go ahead and look at a couple Dota buffs here, um, specifically of these 2 players, Mommy Jesus and Wee Lickman. I see Wee Lickman as a pause 1. I see Mommy Jesus as a pause 1. And I thought I heard Barrel was practicing pause 1 as well, but that may be unrelated. And then if we look at New Couch Day and Bodmas, it's, I believe, just 3 support players. Barrel's a support, New Couch Day is a support. Bodmas is mostly a support. Probably going to play core for this team since they put interest in core. But even then, I believe the only core Bodmas put interest on his role preferences was pause 1. There's already 2 pause 1 players on this team. There's no offlaner. There's no mid. Um, I don't really understand what the roles on this team are meant to be, which is never a good sign in my opinion. If you're gonna have players off-rolling, any potential advantage you have in your average MMR, the like above average MMR of this team, I think kind of goes away because you expect when you have a player play a different role that they are going to be performing less than their MMR suggests they normally would. I'm guessing from recent games that Mommy Jesus is going to play off lane. Still not wholly sure who's going to play mid, maybe Bodmass. Um, but yeah, I think that's a pretty big downside, to be honest. I guess there's no weak links. Even off rolling, none of these players I think are going to be too much of a detriment. That's kind of a mean word to use, but it's kind of true. But at the same time, there's no all stars. There's no like big MMR core players that I think are going to super consistently carry this team. The closest thing you got to that is Wee Lick Man, um, or Wee Lickham. Is it Man or Ham? Wee Lickham, who is going to be playing their pause one. But even then, Archon 2 player, they look all right, but I'm not entirely sure who carries this team. The roles are a little bit scuffed. I'm probably going to be giving this one a C. I don't think I'll go any lower than C. I don't really think any of these teams are deserving of like a failing grade. D's get degrees, but every team's competitive. I think Barrel's team could do fine, but right off the bat, I think that they're probably going to be one of the weaker teams. I mean, I could be speaking too early. You know what? We'll give them a C plus because I haven't. The first team we're looking at here, it could definitely get worse from here. I mean, I have peeked ahead and kind of thought out ahead of time a bit. I think it's probably maybe some worse teams. So we'll give them a C plus for now, and then we'll move on. We'll move on. Let's go to Cats. Cats team. I think Cats was so I was sitting in a different Discord for the entirety of the draft, with Scrub, Lava, another person in and out. I think JD was in my Twitch chat. So I wasn't in the draft channel, but I joined at the end, and it sounded like Cats was not super happy with their draft. And I can kind of understand why. She did end up with the lowest average, I think, out of everyone at 2.2. Ended up spending a lot on Phantom, which is pretty understandable, but then also a lot on Weeb Slayer, who we briefly talked about when looking at the player list. 2.8 thousand MMR, 420 fluffers. Um, it's a lot of money, and that left her with almost nothing. I believe Platinum was bought very early. I believe Platinum was bought round 1 for this 120, so that left her with 0, already a 1k player. Getting another 1k player brings down the MMR quite a lot. The MMR per fluffer of the draft is also very low at an 8 because of these two high bid players. So it's a little rough, but that being said, I don't actually think it's like a bad looking team, to be honest. They have a few very distinct things going for them. First of all, they do have Phantom, who is definitely one of the best pause ones in the draft, assuming they aren't deceiving me with the games I'm watching them play. But it seems like they're just constantly going absolutely ham. I mean, like, Jesus Christ, look at these scores. I know that they're probably playing as weaker players in these games, but they're going to be playing as weaker players in this league as well. Like, if I look at this game, this looks about equal, if not better than some of the teams in this league. So I've no doubt that Phantom is going to put a lot of work in on this team, and that makes the remaining job of the 3 through 5, which is going to be Cats Platinum and Sir Fireball, pretty simple. I think really all they have to do is play together around Weeb Slayer and make space, because it's a very effective strategy this patch. And I believe that Platinum and Cats and Weeb Slayer already play quite a lot together. In fact, I'll just look at Cats Dota buff here. 13 games with Weeb Slayer, 4 with Platinum in the last week. I believe there's even more if you look at lifetime games. Um, we have to keep in mind the group stage for this league is very short. It's an experimental season. It's meant to be kind of short and sweet to even out any issues with the format. And so most of these teams aren't going to have a lot of time to play together, not a lot of time to get used to each other, not a lot of time to synergize. So if you're coming in here with 3 of your players already used to playing with each other, already synergized, and all they really have to do to win is make space for their pause 1, I think you're in a pretty good spot, honestly. Um, there's no doubt that having this big of an MMR disadvantage will hurt, but when I compare this team to, for example, the team we just looked at, where they don't really have an all-star player, um, like Phantom, I give this team the edge. Even if their supporting cast is weaker, I think as long as they can utilize some of their experience together and play well together, I think they'll do fine. So I give this team a B. I think they're pretty mid-grade. I don't think they're as good as maybe some of the teams that have both uh, high MMR averages and pre-existing synergy and star players, which we'll be getting to near the end of this list. But I think they're a bit better than the like weird amalgamation of low MMR cores that some of these teams ended up being. Um, so Cryptic kind of came in here with a bit of a moneyball draft. Every single player he drafted is above the average for MMR per fluffer. His total average is 14.98, which before I did the adjustments on the 100 MMR players was the highest in the entire draft. So he was the Moneyball King. Harbinger only got that advantage when I changed Yon Slight from 100 to 1,000. So on draft day, at least according to the official sheet, Cryptic is the successful moneyballer of the draft. I mean, it shows his average is 3.386, which I believe is the highest still. Yep, even with the adjustments, no one can beat that. It's a very high MMR team. That did come at a cost, though, and that cost was role comfort. This is a lot like the Barrel team, which I think was somewhat expected given how similar Cryptic and Barrel were in terms of position in this draft, both support players with around the same amount of money. Um, and they've gone for similar strategies. I think Cryptic has probably pulled it off a little better here, and we'll just go ahead and quickly look through the Dota buffs. First of all, of course, the average is very high, the highest in the league. But I think the roles are also a little more laid out. If we go ahead and look at Yolk Soup's Dota buff here, she has been practicing some offlane. Some incredibly cursed offlane, mind you, but practicing offlane nonetheless. Cryptic has been practicing mid. Um, not super successful so far, but they're already these players, even if they don't main the role or at least already practicing it, which is quite good. And then we have, I believe, their pause one on a loose moose, who I think just plays pause one normally. Yeah, it's a little bit of a mix, but mostly pause one. Not as much Dota played as Cryptic or Yolk recently, but it's still there. And then I think most importantly, we have the support duo with the Dude and Apon Zeus, which looks incredibly strong. The Dude's Dota buff, I think, was probably the most impressive of the high MMR supports. Oh god, just a shit ton of real pause fours. God, that's a lot of Wrist Spirit. This was not here when I first looked at the Dota buffs. But yeah, a lot of very high impact pause fours like Earth Spirit, a lot of Rubik, good win rates on most of them. I think his recent win rate on Earth Spirit is also very good, even if his overall is a bit rough. There's always a learning curve. And then, of course, Apon Zeus, who's a very capable pause 5, who I assume is going to be playing pause 5. Yeah, I think so. So yeah, overall, the offlane and mid could be a little scuffed. I don't think Cryptic and Yolk are going to be coming out swinging at the full power of them of their MMR. Yolk especially, just because her MMR is so high, and her pool is so fucking cursed. Cryptic maybe might look a little bit better as a 3k flat player, but only relative to his MMR. So both those roles could be a little rough, but I think as long as Loose Moose can play well, I think this team should be fine. I think it is a concern that the 1 week player, the 1 2k player, is the pause one, which is I think probably the most important role. As I've said a couple times now, I guess, in the game. On the other hand, it is a rather easy role to improve on. With the help of coaches, I don't think it's very difficult to just lock down your farming patterns and improve on those, which are going to be the main thing. As long as when you have what is it, a 2 through 5 as high MMR as this, who can make just infinite amount of space for you, all you really need to do is learn to farm well. And if Loose Moose can do that, and the Dude can put in a lot of work on these pause 4s, I think this team will do quite well. Um, I don't think they're like the best, per se. As I already mentioned, I think the off-rolling will hurt, but overall it's okay. I'll give it a B. So I'm a little tempted to give them an A. I guess I'll do the same thing as I did to Barrel. We'll give them B+. I'll give him just a little bit more love than the other B score teams that are coming up. And on that note, Harbinger, with even more MMR per fluffer than Cryptic, once you factor in the 100 MMR players being adjusted up. The average isn't quite as good though, at 2890. Harb had very little money to start with. Um, this might be a sign that it was too low if he's having this much value on the players and is still below average, but maybe not. He spent 400 on Mappo. Uh, Mappo is a player he's played with before in RD12 Mini. Has been playing RD12 for quite some time. Is usually a support player, but will be playing offlane for this team. A role he does dabble in from time to time, as you can see on his most played heroes. You'll see a bit of core, a bit of offlane. Yeah, ancient player. This team is very top heavy, because after that we're going to start falling very fast. We're going to look at Korgath, who is a support player, and will be playing support for the team. Their carry player is going to be Supra, at least for now it looks like. They appear to play a mix of roles, but last I heard they were going to play carry, and Harbinger was going to play mid, and then Yonsolite, who's going to be the other support. Um, there is definitely a very sharp drop here. The mid and the off lane are literally well over half of the MMR of this team. And that does put a lot of weight on their shoulders. I don't even know if I have much else to say about those two than that. There's a lot of weight on their shoulders for sure. The pause one is maybe a bit weak. It's kind of the same thing as Cryptic's team. It's one of your low MR players. You're gonna have to play around them. I think Supra's in a pretty good position to improve, though. He has both Harb and Fatal to coach him up and teach him how to improve their farming patterns and be more efficient. And if they can do that, I think his team looks fine. Korgath is a pretty solid player, at least in league environments, I think. Something that's a little unique about him is how much like league captain's mode games he's played. The win rate isn't positive, but that's whatever. He gets, I think, overvalued in RD12 a lot. But for someone that only has like 1,000-ish lifetime games, the fact he already has 400 ticketed league matches, I think, is pretty nuts. I know he's played a bunch more unticketed in-houses on top of that. So he's very comfy, very familiar with the captain's mode format, which I think is very important here. His actual games played and his actual hero pool is also a lot larger than his pub profile makes it look like. So I think he'll give a lot of support to Harb and Mappo around the map, and if they can, as all these teams are probably going to do, look to make space for their pause 1, and the pause 1 can learn to farm well, I think this team could do okay. I think if they were really to win it all, they're going to need a lot more out of Mappo and Harb than just effective space creation. I think it's possible that Harb and Mappo may need to play some stronger scaling heroes. But I don't know. Overall, they look okay. I'll give them a B. It's just, yeah, no, it's a bit of a fall off here. And the fact that I think if Mappo was a full-time offlaner, who I I had more confidence in them being able to hard carry games from the offlane, I'd maybe be more inclined to give them an A. But I think the fact that Harb is off-rolling by playing mid and Mappo is off-rolling by playing offlane does make it a little less enticing. So we're sticking with a B for now. Luth's team. This is the second highest MR average team in the league, just below Cryptic's. And I'll be honest, I like this team a lot. First things first, the roles are very sensible. Luth is going to play Pause 1, Battle God mid, Scrub 4, Woe 5, and Fishay 3. There's no off-rolling here, really. There's a little bit with Luth and Battle God if we go ahead and open their profiles. So I'm going to close a bunch of shit here. 1 second. If we go ahead and look at the Battle God Smurf account, because he didn't fucking register his main for some reason, and the Luth account, there is a bit of a variety overall. They aren't strictly mid, and they aren't strict or pause 1 players. Battle God plays quite a lot of support. Luth plays a bit of everything, specifically support, I guess. But overall, historically, I believe in leagues, LD12 in particular for Luth and Battle God, I guess. They have played Pause 1 and Pause 2. I think they're both fairly capable. Luth, I think more than anything, probably just has some rust to shake off. It's been a while, I think, since he's played Pause 1 consistently. And Battle God, I don't know, is probably going to continue playing some support for their other leagues. I think this might be MD2L. This is RD2L. Yeah, they're going to keep playing support at the same time, but it doesn't really matter. And then the other three are just very dedicated to their roles. Scrub always plays pause 4, Woe always plays pause 5, and Fishay primarily just plays pause 3. Um, part of my part of the thing I do like about this team is also just very personal, subjective opinions on the players. I think Fishay has the potential to improve even further and play even better. They don't have very many games played. I remember when Fishay only had like 200 games played, and the guy already looked quite capable. I think he took to Dota very well. I just think he plays pretty well for how new he is and his MMR, and I think he's very likely to continue improving. I think Scrub plays very well. I think his MMR is very much a result of his intensive griefing um, that he can't seem to stop. I'm gonna quickly show you his Smurf here, where he's playing more regularly. Like, look at all this fucking red. And then we click on one of the games. We see he's playing Pause 4 Ricky with an Octarine and a Meteor Hammer. The man is an animal, and I think it affects his MMR, but I think his gameplay is better than you would expect. The only problem is that questionable behavior does occasionally seep into league games, so you got to keep him on his best behavior. But otherwise, I think he plays quite well. I think Luth has the potential to play quite well as well. Luth, I think, used to just straight up be 3K, and at some point fell, and I'm not entirely sure why or when. But I think if he shakes off the rust, he's gonna play very well, if not better than his MMR. And I mean, I think Woe also just very solid player. There are 5 that shock calls. I was wrong about that in my initial scouting report. Apparently he does shock call, and I got to see some of that in action recently, which makes him very valuable. And and Battle God's Battle God. If anything, Battle God in combination with Luth might be a slight weakness. I think Battle God sometimes when he's playing mid, Ape Brain goes back to mode pause 4 and just kind of forget to eat creeps and runs at enemies too much. I think I've seen a couple LD12 games where he's just kind of seemed weirdly underfarmed because he's getting too aggressive. And some of some of Luth's carry picks from recently are a little whack with the Bloodseekers, but other than that, I think if both these guys can keep up some consistency, this team's very good. Their MMR's high. I have a lot of faith in all the players. Their roles make a lot of sense. I think there should be pretty good chemistry. The fact that there isn't any like monkey players to agitate Scrub for the most part, other than like maybe Battle God, is pretty good. I think these guys are mostly PMA, other than Scrub, which is important because you got to keep the balance. You know, Scrub's got enough toxicity for like 4 people, so if you want to keep your team wholesome, you got to have a bunch of PMA players. So yeah, I like this team a lot. I'll give him a big fan. First day of the list, Maniac. Maniac. Maniac kind of did the exact opposite of what I said he would do and what I thought he would do in my 90-minute video. He's gone and picked himself a higher MMR pause 3 in Nomad, which was a bit of a surprise. I was kind of joking when I said Maniac would just steal all his pause 3's farm and make them useless, but at the same time, Maniac will steal all his pause 3's farm and make them useless. Maybe not useless. The lane here is potentially quite strong. I think when Maniac's alive and kicking, which he isn't right now, he can be a pretty scary laner. He likes to play the fucking Skyrath and the Lina. And if you don't ban them, in combination with Nomad being a very good player relative to this league, I think there is going to be a lot of danger coming from that off lane. A lot of very sad safe laners, especially with how many safe lanes we've seen so far, and we'll continue to see that are on the lower side of the MMR spectrum for this league. And so that is quite scary. But at the same time, you do need a little more than that. Um, what is it really? I don't know how much it matters if they win their off lane, if they can't also have, maybe not necessarily win their safe lane, but at least have other players to play with. maybe I do mean win their safe lane. If all they do is win the off lane every game, I don't think that's great, and I'm a little concerned because when I look at Oz, who is going to be their safe laner, I don't really see a whole lot of safe lane. To be honest, I know he has a Smurf where he's been playing safe lane. Maybe I can find that real quick. Whoop. Here it is. So there's a bit more safe lane here. It's not exactly been wildly successful though. Even in the wins, the KDAs are a little low. So I'm a little concerned that we're gonna have all this space coming from the off lane. Maniac's then gonna like default to farm mode and not do anything, and the safe lane is gonna be getting thrashed. Um, the MR average of the safe lane, it's not the lowest MR like league or not league lane in the league. I think there are some combos that are lower, but it is quite low, which is a bit concerning. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I'm rambling a bit here, but I guess what I'm just trying to say is I don't know if I like these two laning together. I was kind of serious about Maniac maybe not being with a super good offlaner. Um, but I don't know. Maybe Maniac can change his ways. I've been seeing he does have a fair amount of Nyx played recently, so maybe he'll be more active. Because the Skywrath, although very scary, he did mostly just AFK farm on it, which is not going to be good if your safe lane is getting hammered. I guess the main positive light of this team is their mid. We see Reedy, a legend player, looking pretty good, playing a lot of active heroes, Puck, Void Spirit, a bit of Ember, exactly what we like to see. Um, and that hopefully balances things out a little bit more. Hopefully can have some high impact on the map, maybe even rotate to the safe lane if needed. Um, I think that's where he meant to rotate to. I don't actually remember. Um, but the mid, yeah, I don't know. The mid's quite good. I think me and Scrub shit on him a little bit during our player scout on the basis that he's like lost a ton of MMR, but he looks like he fills the role he needs to play quite well. He's actually been having very good games recently. So if he can keep up these kind of performances, maybe it'll be fine. The main thing is just making sure that Oz can actually farm. I've already mentioned with a couple of the other low mark carries that it is, I think, easier than any other role to just get good at farming and get better at carry. But they will need to do that. So they need to stop playing so much support and get down to that if they want to be able to do well here. Because yeah, I don't know. That's all I have to say. I've been kind of weird on this one. I was actually originally considering giving them to a C. I think when I like compared them to Cryptic's team, I look at Cryptic's team and I say they have a better pause 1, a better 4 by a lot, a slightly worse pause 3 maybe, and then a much better pause 5. But at the same time, their mid should be quite a bit worse. So I don't know. I'm fine giving them a B, I think. And now I'm looking at them again. I think looking at Reedy's Dota buff recently is very reassuring. These are very good performances, so as long as they can do a lot of work, have a lot of impact with their 2 through 5, they can probably do okay. But yeah, they do need to make sure Maniac doesn't grief too hard, and they do need to make sure Oz is playing carry well. So yeah, whatever. Moving on. Nick's team. This draft was very weird. Nick was mostly just memeing the entire draft. Like he kept doing a bunch of dumb shit, which is very much in Nick's way of doing anything. And he's ended up with a pretty interesting spread. He's a very good 3 and 5. Jackman was, in terms of MMR, was a bit overbid. I think 6.74 MMR per fluffer is quite low, but I am a pretty big Jackman fan, and I think he does potentially play better than his MMR. And I think he probably will have a lot of impact in these games. And then we have Ceres with the highest MR on the team at 3.7. Who also should, I mean, have quite a lot of impact. Not the same as a core player, though. Like, I think Ceres can win lanes in this league. I think she can hopefully do well in team fights in this league as well. I don't know what heroes is she playing, because Pause 5 right now, I think, is really lane focused, which makes having a high MR Pause 5 kind of iffy. Wow, that's a lot of losses. But I mean, if they're playing Witch Doctor, Shaman, and shit, these are heroes that can also do a lot of work in team fights. So we'll see. I think this is potentially a lot of God. I'm trying to like be positive about this team, but I am admittedly struggling. Series and Jackman I think can offer a lot of support power. They're going to offer initiation. They're going to offer team fight. They're going to offer one lanes. I think Jackman is going to win a lot of lanes in this league. But after that, who are they like doing all this for? Who are they making space for? Who are they winning lanes for? Who are they initiating for? Because I look at this team and I look at the cores and I'm seeing Nick, and we're gonna call this one Zach because I don't like this other name. And here we have two Crusader players, both of which primarily play mid. One of which is going to be playing safe lane, at least one game, I assume. Well, one of them will play safe lane each game. It may not be the same person every game. They may swap. Maybe it'll be mostly Zach, since they seem to have more farm-intensive heroes, even if they played a lot of them mid. Wow, those are some low win rates, but we'll ignore those. They have high win rates on, I guess. Oh wow, they're a Lone Druid spammer. We don't think highly of those, but they have the Wraith King and the Slark. Yeah. And then I know I've seen Nick do some stuff. I've seen him play some carry well. But for the most part, they don't really seem to have like a real carry player, which is rather concerning in a patch that seems to be all about the carries. Um, so I don't know. It looks like this team is going to have this really good supporting cast. I say supporting cast. I mean one of their like probably pause 4 players is also Guardian. I mean they look like a pretty good Guardian to be honest. I'd be happy with this Guardian, but they're still a Guardian, so it's mostly just Ceres and Jackman. Um, to set up a game for one of these players to hopefully win. And I'm not really sure how likely that's going to be. Nick is a pretty big memer. I guess I said that once already, but it really shows in the drafts. So I think possibly we might just see some really wacky shit come out. Well, we're definitely going to see some wacky shit come out from Nick, actually, if he's drafting and captaining this team. It is going to happen. But we may see it work as well. I think it's entirely possible he manages to draft shit in a way that actually lets him win without following traditional meta stuff. I don't know if it's super likely. I'm gonna have to give this team a C in the end, but I think it's possible they can maybe overperform if they can just find a way to work the way that works best for them. But in terms of like the current, what I kind of see is the layman's meta and how most pubs seem to go, and especially how most league games seem to go, with a lot of almost 4 protect 1 style gameplay. I don't really see this team doing very well in that uh, environment. And on top of that, their MMR average is also quite low. I think they're like in the bottom 3, if not just second to lowest. I think Cats may be the only one that's lower. I could double check that. Yep, they are the second lowest MMR average on top of that. So it's rough. They're super reliant, I think, on Nick and Zach to play above badge or just do something out of the ordinary um, in order to do well. So, or for Jackman to solo carry, but I think that's going to be easier said than done. So, a little bit rough from them, but we'll see how they do. We'll believe as much as we can. So let's move on to Princess's team. This is another very very top-heavy team. We have Princess and JD, both very good core players. Up here, JD, an enormous amount spent on him, 650, 5.5 MMR per fluffer. I believe that was the lowest. Because what was Phantom? Yeah, lower than Phantom, which is pretty intense. And then we follow this up with Thrill House, who I think is a pretty nice add-on to this 3K pause 4 player for 125. Can't complain too much. And then we have the low MMR players with Darth Balls and Matty Boy. So yeah, this team is definitely going to be very reliant on Princess and JD putting in work. I think part of the issue here is that I believe Thrill House is going to play pause 3, uh, which is a little rough because this is in theory like your one other high MMR player. So to have them off roll is gonna hurt you, at least a little bit. Hopefully, With all the assistance of all the coaches and such, Thrillhouse can rather quickly adapt to the Pause 3 lifestyle. But I think at least for the first couple weeks, this is probably going to be a little bit rough. Um, because Darth Balls also, I think it's also known as Joe Fitz, right? I'm going to keep saying Darth Balls because that's great. Yeah, I think this is Joe Fitz. Is it just J Fitz? I thought it was Joe Fitz. Whatever. We'll call him Darth Balls. That's much better. Darth Balls and Matty Boy, although I think lovely people who I hope will greatly improve with the assistance of the coaching in this league, are currently definitely on the weaker side of the player pool. So they're probably fine as a support duo. Um, but I think it would have been a little bit nicer if they could have had Thrillhouse on his comfort role and grabbed an offlaner. I think Matty Boy's the only one that plays significant offlane, and it's just a lot of bristleback. CK. Um, Heroes that kind of require you to win lane and snowball, which is very hard to do when you're significantly below the average MMR of the league. So I do understand why Princess is doing this role swap for now, at least, but it does hurt a bit. Overall, I think purely off of Princess and JD, I'm willing to give this team a B. It's possible that as Thrillhouse gets used to their role and potentially supports improve, this team could be even better. They really already have the foundations for a great team with a good pause one and a good mid. But right now, that's kind of looking like all they have. So B for now. Mr. Rogan Tasty, Mr. Brent. This team's interesting because I think there is the potential for this team to have a very logical role layout, but I think they might, from what I hear, I think they're just not going to do that. So let's have a look at some Dota buffs here, see if they're doing anything. Also, Ayla said they may not even be able to play because they screwed up what time it started at, which is interesting. Hopefully that doesn't actually happen, but it might. So, Brent originally said that they wanted to play Pause 1 when they were first signed up and agreed to captain. Why is this linked to their matches page? They picked a good mid for a pretty good price, I think, 550 for a 4K mid, one of the, well, literally the only 4K mid in the pool. That was draftable, I believe, which is a very nice pickup. We also saw them get Shift, who looks like, I've opened this person's thing twice, haven't I? Who looks like a pretty good offlaner, higher Archon, a lot of offlane played. We see Axe, Shaker, Tide all in their top 3. We also see Underlord, DK, Slardar. Positive win rates, good KDAs, a very solid looking offlaner. And then we saw them pick Pyro for a lot of money. It actually wasn't even in this order, by the way. I think Pyro went first, but for dramatic effect, we're saying it in this order. Pyro was 390, which was a lot of money for an Archon player. But I think probably fairly worth it. Whenever I see Pyro play Pause 1, they always look very solid. It's only been recently I've watched him play Pause 1, I guess I should say. It isn't that many games, but he has looked very solid in all of them. He seems to be a player that's kind of already got his grip on how to farm, and is probably going to be on the climb here if they choose to be. I'm seeing very high win rates, at least this week, with some of their friends. So this is a player that I think was probably at least potentially worth bidding up. It's a lot of money. It's a little questionable, but overall I think it's okay. And between Shift, Aelith, and Pyro, we have what looks to be a very good Tricore. But what I heard was that it may still be Brent Pause 1, like they originally said. And if that's the case, things get weird real fast. Because this means that we're probably going to see Pyro on Pause 3, which is something he's historically played, but hasn't practiced in quite some time. At least not on a regular basis. And I guess we're going to see Shift on support, which also seems to be something they play, but not on a super regular basis. And I would personally support this move. I think the idea of having a little more players on core roles, with the idea of them being coached and improved, is a good thing for the league. But for the sake of rating a team's strength, it's definitely going to be a pretty big downside. It's kind of hard to argue for having a lower mark core ever from the perspective of the team's strength and ability to win. Especially when there's such a large difference here. I mean, the difference between Pyro and Brent, I think, is quite large. I believe their last pick is also a core main? No, they are a support main. So this is probably going to be their pause 4. Unless they have to play pause 5 because the core player wants to play pause 4. No, it's probably going to be shift support if they do it this way. Plays a lot of Lich. So shift 5 and then JK pause 4, I think. But JK doesn't even seem to play much Dota, which is weird. So I don't know. I don't know. It's kind of a weird team. I think if they do the normal layout with Aelith 1, Pyro 2, and Shift 3, this is probably like an A tier team. Um, but I will trust my secret informants and say that it's going to be Brent pause 1. Partially because I just think that'd be cooler. Um, in which case, I think they're a B team. It's also worth noting their MMR average is on the lower side at 2.5, so largely because they have these two very low MMR players. So we'll just put them as a B for now. And if Aelith leaves, that's also going to be another wrench in the works. It doesn't necessarily make the team worse, because his replacement could frankly just be better than him. But I guess it could potentially change my outlook on this team. But yeah, I don't know. Interesting team. We'll see how their roles end up. Let's move on to Yop. Now this is like, I think, the real powerhouse team. 15.35 MMR per fluffer. Very good money ball. 3.1 and a bit average MMR. Second highest in the league or third? Third highest in the league. So very high average MMR. We have Yop and Bible Man on the 1 and the 3. These players have a shit ton of games together. Let's close all these old tabs again. So I think there's already a lot of pre-existing synergy, probably an idea of how they want to draft and play in game. Yop seems to be a very stable carry, also one of the highest MMR carries at Ancient 3. I've talked endlessly now about how important this role is, so I think there's a lot of power already on this team just from Yop playing pause 1. Bible Man is probably, I mean, frankly, the only games I've seen Bible Man play are like meme party queue games, so I'm not sure how good he actually is, because in those games he absolutely is actively griefing. But just based on his MMR, I think it's safe to say that he's going to be a pretty solid offlaner in this league. He's hopefully going to win a lot of lanes. He's going to make a lot of space. The supports are also very high. This is the team that got the legendary Blackout for a mere 55 fluffers, and we also have BMX of AB12's TBD fame, presumably on the pause 4, if I remember correctly. Maybe pause 5. I think these are maybe both kind of pause 5 players, but we can overcome that. I say we. However they end up doing it, though, these are the supports. It's like Archon average. Some of these teams have like Guardian average supports and weaker cores. I think this team's pretty insane. The only like slight weak link is probably Inno. Inno is going to be playing mid for this team. Last I checked, Inno does not really play mid very regularly. Here's actually a scrim they played we'll look at. I don't know why they ticketed this, but they did. So if we look at this, played a puck and he lost. But he honestly did quite well. If we look back at this, it's mostly like ricing carries. This is Eno's playstyle is ricing carries. But even though he lost lane, I mean, he went 6-4 and 14 on a very active hero. Not the highest skill participation on the team. Bible Man kind of stealing that from him, but that probably has more to do with Bible Man winning lane than anything. But honestly, not a bad performance. I think there's definitely going to be some concern about, maybe a little underperforming here, but frankly, even if you replaced Eno with like a 1k MMR mid, I think this team would be quite good. Looking at the scrim with Eno's scores, I think Eno is potentially going to be a better mid than I would have guessed him to be. He's still just playing his normal carries in his pubs, but based off the two results we have, I think he could be a fine mid. So, in combination with the insane side lanes, I think this team is just an easy A. If I had to give anyone an A+, it would probably be them. And fuck it, let's do it. Because, I don't know, this team's just nuts. Super high on Marovich, a bunch of well-known players. Yeah, I mean, well-known to me at least, within my circles. These are all players with league experience. They're all players with Captain's Mode experience. And some of them are players that play together, even, on a regular basis. So, yeah. Fantastic. As I said, maybe a little hit or miss, but overall, not going to be a problem. Yumi team. This is the team that is like the fourth iteration of Yumi and Scroomlight. I swear these guys have been on like 3 teams already together. I think they first played together in like RD2L, and then he brought him into LD2L, and he picked him at LD2L, and they played in RD2L again together. I don't know. They seem to just always be on the same team, which is kind of funny to me. The MR average for this team is somewhat middling at 2.7. It's not on the lower side. There's a lot of teams that are right around 2.5, but it's not one of the 3K teams either. MR per fluffer, pretty much dead average. I think it like close to 12, but technically still 11 was like the total average for the league. So he's pretty close there. Got his supports for pretty good value, but spent a lot on Scroomlight. Ooh, pardon me. On these other players, I don't know a whole lot about most of them. I think Hawks is an RD12 player who is meant to be quite solid for their MMR. I mean, they definitely have a very good win rate. I wonder how much RD12 they've actually played. 174 games, very high win rate there as well. I don't know what to say. Hawks just seems to win a lot of games. Um, even recently with Yumi and the boys. So, yeah, I think Hawks is meant to be very solid. One of these players has to be their offlaner. I guess I could look at that scrim I had open. Oh, it's probably gonna be Lila Lads then. Is this the scrim? Oh, this is a different scrim? Dude, why do you keep taking your scrims? What are you guys doing? Whatever. Yes, it looks like it's Lila Lads offlane with Hawks support. So the MMR is actually spread out pretty intelligently here, putting Hawks on the pause 4. I think Hawks prefers pause 4 anyway, but it definitely helps when you have your higher MMR support with the weaker core, in my opinion, to spread the love a little. Their offlane is definitely going to be a bit of a weakness, but their pause 2 and pause 1, which I think is going to be a flip flop between Yumi and Streamlight, is very strong. Um, and so, yeah, uh, I want to have another quick look at the scrim. What heroes are they picking? More Ricky. I know there was a little bit of concern, like Scrub was talking about how both Screamlight and Yumi are very greedy. And if that ends up playing out, that definitely could be a problem. But from the like 3 ticketed scrims I've seen, it looks like they're just usually having one of them on an active hero. I think they had one game where they had like Battle Fury, Jug, and Alchemist, which is a little whack. But for the most part, it seems like they're managing to at least have one active hero, one active player. I think if both of these players did choose to just farm, it would probably go poorly because the people making space for them are like 2k average, and only 3 of them. It's already, I think, a problem to only have 3 players if the other team's running 4. But even worse when they're much weaker. Um, but yeah, it looks like, yeah, for the most part, they're having at least one of either Yumi or Scroomlight be on a more space makey role. So it looks like a very good team to me. I'm gonna give them A for now. They're definitely top heavy, but they almost look like just a better version of the Princess JD team, where I think I have a lot more confidence in their 3 through 5, and there's also just a lot more MMR on their 1 and 2. It's almost just a strictly better version. I guess the only downside is maybe the hero pools. Yumi's a little bit of a puddler, whereas JD's a bit more of a madman that'll play anything. But generally speaking, kind of just looks like a better version of Princess's team. Which, in the same way that Cryptic and Barrel, I think, expected to have similar teams, Yumi and Princess also probably expected to have similar teams. I think it just so happens Yumi did a slightly better job of drafting. And then we get to my team. How long is this recording? Okay, yeah, this is just an F. Let's move on. It has lava on it. Um, yeah, so it's an F. Let's do predictions real quick, and then I'll wrap up, and we'll get this all done in under an hour. Uh, let's go through them. Harbinger versus Barrel. I think I'm going to give it a 1-1, personally. Do I give it a 1-1? You know what? Actually, I've changed my mind. We're going to give it a 2-0. I need to stop saying as I said all the time, but as I said, I think Barrel's team is a little lacking in big scary cores. Harb literally only has big scary cores, so I imagine that Harb will have a very good time both games. I think Mappa will probably have a very good time both games, and that's a recipe for a win. Maniac versus Cats. is a little more interesting. This is almost just assuming they keep the roles stagnant here and they don't do anything fancy flip-floppy. It's literally just going to be the Phantom versus Nomad lane. And I think whoever wins that lane is probably just going to win the game. Um, Currently, based on recent performance and my knowledge of the players overall, I do definitely favor Nomad in that. I guess we look at the mid lane, Reedy versus Weeb Slayer. That's also probably pretty even. Um, so I guess I give this one to Cats. That's a 2. There we go. Yeah, yeah. If Nomad can win how does Nomad win this lane? I think is kind of the problem here. In theory, like offlaners tend to beat safe laners, but if it gets too bad, Phantom can probably just go jungle, and I don't know if Maniac's very good at following people into jungle. I imagine if Cats just bans out the Skywrath, they can probably pick Phantom a winning lane, and that'll be game. So it could be a 1-1, maybe if it's just purely based off who is what pick. But I give a big enough edge to Phantom to give him a 2-0. Luth versus Cryptic. This is a little hard because I do really like the Luth team, but part of Luth's advantage is just the raw MMR, and Cryptic is one of the few teams that really combats him in that. I think overall Luth's team looks a bit stronger, but I don't know. I feel like if it was a week later and Luth had played some more pause 1 games and I was more confident in Luth to carry, I'd be very certain of Luth being a 2-0 here. But today I think I might actually go for a 1-1. I talked about Scrub being a very good player, but I also talked about the Dude being a very good player. And right now, with the Dude just winning game after game for Spirit and the Scrub just hardcore griefing, I have a little more faith in the Dude to carry games. Luth's mid player Battle God is probably better than Cryptic. Um, but so maybe Battle God can carry them here and help them get a 2-0. And Luth is probably better than Loose Moose even when he's rusty. But I don't know. The Dude is very scary. They're gonna have to kind of choose, I think, between banning like the Earth Spirit and banning whatever weird shit Yolk is playing in the off lane, which is a little hard, um, unless they can like figure out some good counter picks. So we'll just go for a 1-1 for now. If I had to choose a 2-0 though, it would definitely be going to Luth. Yumi versus Brent. This is probably just a 2-0, I think. I was gonna, well, maybe not. Where's the Brent team again? The mid lane, I mean, this is going to be the hardest mid lane matchup, or one of the hardest mid lane matchups for Yumi slash Screamlight for sure. And Pyro could make the off lane tough. I definitely still am just going to favor Yumi's team here. They've been scrimming together, which is great. They've been playing, I think, some pubs together. And they have a very good 1-2 duo. Yeah. I'm also, I guess, still running on the assumption that it's Brent pause 1 and Pyro pause 3. So I'll probably give that a 2-0 to Yumi. But we'll see. I don't know. Maybe Aelith can pull some shit off. Maybe Pyro can do a lot of work from the off lane, and Brent just needs to farm. I hesitant 2-0. I think a 1-1 is pretty believable, but I will be surprised if it's an 0-2. Yop versus Nick, this is just like a hard 2-0. I honestly, yeah, I don't know what to say. Nick is one of the weaker looking teams. Yop, I think, is the strongest team out of anyone. This is like the most confident I am on like any prediction is Yop 2-0ing Nick. So please do try and prove me wrong here, Nick, because I will be blown away. But yeah, that's a 2-0 from me. And this is also a 2-0 because the only F tier team, they aren't gonna win any games. So yeah, okay. Well, that's that. I'll be back next week to see how I did, to look over the games and make predictions for week 2. Until then, peace.